This could change everything for the Chicago Bulls. We're going to be talking about 8 questions that the Chicago Bulls need to answer this upcoming preseason in order to change the direction of this franchise moving forward for this season and for some seasons to come. This is your host, Rico Greenhowe, and you have found yourself on another episode of Bulls Digest. So we're going to be talking about what to expect going into preseason basketball with these 5 games. I think that there are some questions that the Chicago Bulls are going to need to answer as they continue to try to pivot and find a direction for this franchise. And so let's go into point number 1, and that is Billy Donovan. Okay, Billy Donovan has come out in media day. He's come out on the radio interviews and things and said that he is looking for a much faster pace and play for the Chicago Bulls. And that's fine. All right. But if you're going to play that pace and you're going to kind of mimic Golden State and what they were able to do, I would just say that it is organized chaos. And so just going out there and just getting a whole bunch of shots up at the rim doesn't necessarily translate into success. And so I think that this is going to be critical throughout the preseason to try to figure out how, in fact, he is going to still play fast and be efficient. And on top of that, Billy Donovan is going to need to figure out what he is going to do on the defensive end. We already know that we do not have Alex Caruso. Patrick Williams, more than likely, it is suggested that he is probably going to be our best on-ball defender that is going to be in the starting lineup. More than likely, we might see Ayo coming off the bench. But aside from that, Billy Donovan has talked about that it is going to be a collective effort on the defensive end. And so we know that we're going to have to try to figure out what rotations and how we are going to play on the defensive end in order to, well, obviously get stops and then get into these fast break situations. Clearly, between him and AK, they talk about not wanting to go out there and run a whole bunch of half-court sets. Obviously, we don't have DeMar DeRozan anymore. Yes, we do have Coby White, which I think can still do the things that DeMar DeRozan did. But just point being that Billy Donovan and this particular version of the Bulls, they do not want to play that type of style that they played before, which is that half-court offense. So I think that these are definitely some questions that Billy Donovan is going to have to answer along with his rotations. How do you mix in these younger players with these veteran players, making sure that you're getting the max development out of your younger players, and also to, keeping your vets out there to ensure that you're still competitive, because that is one of the things that AK talked about doing this season is they want to go out and be competitive. So it sounds like they're not wanting to tank. So you have to figure out that balance between the two. And so I think that that is something that Billy Donovan is going to have to answer as we go through preseason. So as we move to point number 2, it is Zach LaVine. All right. So Zach LaVine has come into camp. He's talked about how he is absolutely locked in. He is ready to play any role that he needs to with the Chicago Bulls. And we want to see that. We want to see, can he be an impactful player and some nights be the third and fourth option, sometimes the first option? Who knows what it's going to look like? But he has already come in and even said that whatever role they need, I'm going to be able to do it. And I'm going to make sure that I show everybody that I can be an effective player this way. And so we are going to want to see that. We're going to see a taste of that in the preseason. Who knows how many minutes that they are going to play with these starters and things like that. I would suggest that they would get some minutes, to get the continuity going. So I'm curious to see now, what is Zach LaVine's role going to be with these new guards that are coming in. The next point to look at is Josh Giddy. So we already know that we've traded our best defender away in Alex Caruso for Josh Giddy. And I think that we could arguably say that Josh Giddy is still trying to get to the best version of himself as a player. I think that that is what the Chicago Bulls really invested into. They're seeing if they can get the Josh Giddy that is going to get to this triple doubles and things that he has shown in the past. And I think he's going to need to be a lot better of a shooter on the outside. And no, I'm not saying he's going to be just a standstill three-point shooter, but when the opportunity comes, I think that Josh Giddy is going to now need to extend out his game and make that defense stretch a little bit more to become a bit more dangerous on the offensive end. And defensively, he's going to need to get an identity. He talked about needing to find one on the defensive end, and he does not want to be that player that teams are going to come in on the scouting report and say, hey, this is the defender that we want to go at. That's not what Josh Giddy wants. And so I'm curious to see what he is going to do now on the defensive end to really be assertive and help this team run this fast-paced offense, all right? And so that brings us to the next point, and that is Coby White. Coby White has said that he can play off the ball. There's multiple reports suggesting that he will have to play off the ball. Obviously, at times he will be the point guard. But Coby White, I love the fact that he's been through a lot of different situations with the Chicago Bulls, and I really think that he is going to excel because every time that he's been given the opportunity to go out and excel, well, Coby White has done very well, and I would expect nothing less from him this season. And so we want to see now in preseason, again, how is this three-guard offense going to work? I think between all three of them, Coby White definitely might be the better defender between Zach LaVine, between Josh Giddy and himself. I think that he is the better defender. So let's see if he can also be the same type of leader on the offensive end and the defensive end for this particular team. So next, let's move into the vets on the team, starting with Lonzo Ball. And so I talked about Billy Donovan, and I talked about how he is going to need to figure out rotations. And so Lonzo Ball is obviously working his way back from an injury that nobody has worked their way back from. And so we're certainly rooting for that. And between him and Torey Craig, it would suggest that those players are going to be better served to be in a team that is in a win-now situation. But right now, there's no trades on the table, and they're out there with the Chicago Bulls. And I would have to think that Billy Donovan is going to utilize them. And so how do you utilize these players, help these players continue on with their career, and also make sure that they are not in the way from some of your younger players that you are invested into for the future? And so figuring out what the minutes are going to look like for Lonzo Ball, figuring out what the play style is going to be like for him on the offensive end, you know, what type of direction you want to go with that unit, what type of defensive adjustments are you going to have to make? Because one of the things he talks about after this particular tweet is that, you know, the one thing that he has kind of had a little bit of a challenge in, and that is defensively. He's talking about, you know, getting over screens and things like that, which is something I talked about that was going to be a challenge for him. Obviously, with his high basketball IQ, he's able to figure it out on the defensive end, but physically, he can't maybe do some of the things that he used to do, admitting that he has a brand new knee. So I think Billy Donovan is going to have to try to figure out how do you mix in these veterans with these younger players. All right, and so next up, as we continue on, now we get into the younger players that we just don't know enough about, and starting with Adama Sanogo, starting with Kenny Lofton Jr. These are players that it suggests that if you play them, they can actually be effective in the lineup. And so we don't know what it's going to look like for them when we get to some real NBA action. Obviously, they've excelled in the G League, and then they've had moments in the NBA, but this is going to be a unique situation for players like Sanogo, Kenny Lofton Jr., maybe DJ Stewart, who knows, but they're going to have to step up and step in and maybe play some major minutes, especially if AK eventually makes a move and trades off some of these veterans, mainly a player like Vooch or somebody like that. Then you're going to see naturally Jalen Smith, who we want to see what he looks like in extended minutes. What can he be a starter in this league? Like, it's a lot of players on our roster right now that it suggests that if they're able to play some extended minutes, they might have some success in this league. And look, we are not slated to go to the NBA Finals. We're not even slated to necessarily be a qualifier for the playoffs this year. So I think that this is the particular time in the season during these 5 preseason games that you give these younger players like Sanogo, Julian Phillips, Dalen Terry, the list goes on, and you give these players those moments and you give them that experience that Billy Donovan was talking about in trying to really build these professional habits. Let's see what they do when you put them out there against maybe some of the starters for other teams, because you know that there is going to be moments in this preseason where they're going to start their starting unit for maybe a little bit. I would say Billy Donovan would need to throw some of these younger guys out there and see, because he's not wanting to go and put them into games once the game starts at 30 minutes or whatever the case he said, 30 minutes per or whatever. You can go ahead and you can see what they're going to look like against some good competition in preseason. Yes, it's preseason, but still you get a chance to see what they're going to do in response here. And so lastly, that leads us to Matas Buzelis, and this is probably one of the most exciting Bulls that we have on the roster, along with, Patrick Williams. We're curious to see if Patrick Williams is going to take that next step. But Matas Buzelis looks like a player that, he might have franchise player written on him. I mean, he's looked good in the Summer League. He's looked good in some of the highlights that we've seen with the G League Ignite. But then there has been the question about him, because I talked about how Billy Donovan was saying that, from a physicality standpoint, he's still trying to figure it out. And he even admits that he's underdeveloped. But I think that there is going to be a lot maybe placed on his shoulders, especially if we have an injury in the starting lineup. I can imagine that he is going to get the call first to come off the bench for these younger players. And so, I'm hoping that Matas Buzelis and the Chicago Bulls really got it right with this draft selection, because it is going to mean a lot for us as we continue to build out this team. And I think the best way to really get him developed is not only the practices and, occasionally, I guess if you have to send him down to the G League, fine, but you need to get him into some NBA action. You need to get him used to that type of physicality, that type of speed, and you got to let him figure it out. And I'd have to believe with his motor, with his effort, which is something that everybody's talked about, including Billy Donovan. He said, look, I've seen a lot of players that have had the skill, but they do not have the will that Matas Buzelis has to be great. I think that we're going to see something special, but we need to play him in these 5 preseason games. And so let me know in the comments what you are thinking about these players, the coaches that I have mentioned, and what is going to be the biggest key for the Chicago Bulls this preseason as they try to figure out what they want to do with this franchise. And so before we jump out of here, I just want to thank everybody for liking and subscribing and sharing. It means a lot to us here at Bulls Digest as we try to reach 5,000 subscribers before the NBA season starts. And look, preseason basketball is upon us starting tomorrow. Super excited about that. And all I can say is go Bulls, and I will see you on the next one. Peace.